with Chris Milk. By way of introduction, Chris Milk is an American entrepreneur, director, and immersive artist known for producing challenging and unique works of art by employing technological innovations in his creative process. He is co-founder and CEO of Within, a company using immersive technologies to build products for transformative experiences. Within is behind Supernatural, the world's first in-home VR fitness service, as well as Wonderscope, the revolutionary AR storytelling and reading app for kids. He has presented at 2 TED conferences and has had his interactive installation artwork showcased around the world, including MoMA and Tate Modern. So first of all, Chris, thanks for joining this Fireside Chat.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
I want to dive in on the latest and maybe like work backward, which I know is not normally the way things like this go, but Supernatural came out earlier this year. So I'd love if you could give kind of a top line of what Supernatural is, and where I want that to go is some of the backstory behind the inspiration and what prompted for Supernatural.
So Supernatural is a digital exercise service in virtual reality. We actually just launched our first meditation session last weekend. So it is now exercise and meditation, but there's much broader expanse to explore, I think, in the world of health and wellness. So how do we get to this? That's a question I get a lot, because it might seem sort of like a little bit of a fork in the road, but it's incorporating a lot of the things that Aaron Koblin and I, my co-founder, have been searching for. Primarily for the last decade plus, we've been using new and developing technologies to build or try to build meaningful, transformative experiences. And most recently, that's been in VR and AR. But before that, it was in interactive, in motion capture, museum installations, crowdsourcing, interactivity on the web. We did a lot of interactive music videos back in the day. And so, we approach things with that sort of mindset. And about 2 years ago, we started trying to get in shape, both of us at the same time. And what you do when you're people like us is you naturally gravitate toward the most technological, newfangled solutions to the problem, which we did. And we bought a number of them and tried most of them. And exercise is an interesting thing. It only works if you keep doing it. That's like the best exercise you can possibly do is the exercise that you just keep doing. If you do, 1 push-up a day, that's better than getting the most advanced, Equinox gym membership and going once. So we tried all these different systems, and breaking it down to a really granular level, what you have is exercise, especially home exercise, it's not really fun. And the best new services, what they have been able to achieve is add some level of fun on top of something that is fundamentally not fun. An exercise bike, the act of, pedaling repetitively on an exercise bike is fundamentally not fun. You can add other things on top of that, which, certainly some have done now to great effect. You add a person on top of it that's speaking to you. So now you have like a human connection. You add some gamified elements, leaderboards, you add great music. And these are things that ultimately can distract you from what is just not a fun thing to be doing on its own. But if those things start wearing, if you get tired of those things that are on top of it, you sort of slowly return back to the not fun fundamental activity. And that's what happened with us. And then if you look sort of like at the spectrum of things that you can do as exercise, there's things like skiing, surfing, snowboarding, mountain biking. There's things like tennis, playing soccer with your friends. And these things are, many of them are sports. So there's a gamified aspect in them. they are fundamentally fun in the actual act of doing it. Like skiing, whether you're doing it competitively as a sport or not, is just fun to do. The problem is that these are not things that you can roll out of bed, before you go to work and jump into and do, and then jump in the shower and drive to your office. They take, traveling someplace, they take usually other people involved, a bunch of orchestration, a bunch of equipment. But the experience of them is both, really fulfilling, but also a great, cardio exercise. So, on one hand, you have this home exercise environment where the experience, you're just trying to find ways to distract yourself from the actual experience. And then on the other hand, you have these amazing experiences, but require a lot of extra things to be able to achieve them you can't do on a regular basis in your home. And virtual reality, is, ultimately it's a tool to craft human experience. So amazing experience over here, not great experience over here, constrained by your geographical location, the amount of space that you have, your ability to travel. So it felt like virtual reality could live somewhere in the middle and bridge these two experiences, like bring the experience of this into the experience of your home. So we started, we were also seeing at the same time, we were doing things like Life of Us and these collaborative shared storytelling experiences that we were showcasing at different festivals like Sundance and Tribeca and South by. And we were seeing people moving around, being really free, sweating. We were having to constantly wipe down headsets because people are sweating in them. And it just seemed like there's all these things together. There's a real opportunity. Also playing, the rhythm games that were just starting to come out at the time, Audio Shield, and the others that came after it, where you're moving your body to music, which is, that is not something that is recently fun. That is something that we've been doing for hundreds of thousands of years as a species, moving your body to music, especially moving your body to music in nature, has a long history with our species. So it just seemed like putting all these things together, there was an opportunity to build something that you couldn't really build as a exercise, health, wellness system unless you were employing the tools of virtual reality.
Yeah, I'm remembering back to Chorus, and at Sundance, and being able to go through that with friends and see each other dancing, like that simple feature was so powerful, but it also induces more movement. So I totally see that. You hit on something that I want to kind of draw maybe a sort of more attention to for a second, because obviously your TED Talk, where you sort of dubbed VR the ultimate empathy machine, that defined the discourse for how people spoke about VR. It still does, but particularly back in that moment, sort of in the immediate aftermath of Oculus, of the Kickstarter, and of Facebook acquiring Oculus, and then all of these filmmakers getting into VR, I think were inspired by that TED Talk and by the way that you were thinking about this new translation of narrative and this sort of the level of direct connection that could exist as in a storytelling medium. And I do see a line between that and supernatural. But I'd love to hear from you more how you see those things being related. How is empathy and how is storytelling playing into what you've put into supernatural? And then also you mentioned meditation, so what you're continuing to put into supernatural.
Going back to what I said before, is we're trying to build meaningful transformative experiences. And we think that these new technologies that are unlocking on a regular basis have the opportunity to build things like we've never seen before, like we've never experienced before as humans. And we've worked with many of them over the years now, long before VR. VR is sort of the culmination of a lot of the different uh, technologies that we work with, like interactivity and immersion, personalization. But going back to like it's almost 10 years now that we did the Wilderness Downtown, which was the Arcade Fire piece where you put in your address where you grew up as a child, and that was trying to reconnect you to a person that you once were, and there is an abstract story inside of there, and a lot of our work is very narrative based, but some of it is much more sort of abstract and immersive and just interactive, experiential. So I think the empathy machine, yes, the empathy machine. So I was surprised at the debate that it sparked, because it seemed to be, the debate seemed to be about just calling it an empathy machine at all. And what I was saying was it was the ultimate empathy machine. I mean, the empathy machine moniker was Roger Ebert talking about cinema, and what he was saying was, this medium has an ability to connect you to another person in another time in another place, and lets you understand them and their experience in a way that you couldn't before this technology. And ultimately, like, all mass mediums are empathy machines. Like the printing press was the OG of empathy machines. Like, it allowed people to understand the experience of another person, halfway around the world. But all of these things, they're just tools. And a VR is just a tool like any of those others, and it requires artists and storytellers to craft the work. And I think what a lot of people push back on, which was never my intention, was the idea that VR is sort of like this empathy magic bullet, that all you do is put something in VR and suddenly you're going to understand another place, another time, another person. And that's of course not the case. Like, it is a medium, and requires craft. You wouldn't show up to someplace with a movie camera and just put it on a tripod and hit record and just expect this magical thing to come out of it, that gave people a feeling of understanding and meaning about what it was capturing. Like I look at it like there's a progression, right? There's the tool, which is the technology. It is the machine, and whether that's a cinema camera or a printing press or a radio or a video camera in VR. The tool is used by artists. That's artists being anyone that's going to use the tool for the means of making a work. So you have the artist, and the artist has a vision, and they use their craft to take that tool and use their vision and craft it into a work. And then that work ideally generates meaning in an audience. And you can't just take the tool and expect there to be meaning. And you can't even take the tool and add the artist and expect there to be meaning. Like, there has to be vision. And even if you have vision, there's lots of filmmakers and authors and painters and sculptors and everything of the like that have a vision, but they don't necessarily have the craft. That's why you go to school. That's why you become an apprentice, like, to learn the craft. And only once you have all those things, then can you actually make a work that generates meaning for an audience. So what I was not saying was take the tool, get the meaning. It still requires all the things that other mediums require, all the other empathy machines require. It just, I think, it has the opportunity to it has the opportunity as a medium to generate a level of meaning that may be beyond what other mediums are able to do. And that's a theory. I don't think it's been widely proven by any means. When I made the talk, this was 5 years ago or something now, probably. And what I was saying was, I'm raising my hand here because I'm seeing something that maybe we're not talking about, which is, this isn't just a piece of technology. It's not just a platform for video games. There's an opportunity here to make really meaningful things for people to experience. And the reason that I was saying that it was the ultimate empathy machine, or the theory was because all other mediums are essentially an artist crafting, using their vision, a work that is a encapsulation of a experience of someone else, that you're going to witness. So when you watch a movie, a director or writers, the team have crafted through the tools of the medium, motion picture cameras, editorial, sound design, music. They've crafted something that you observe, you bear witness to, but it is the experience of another. It is not your experience. And I thought what was so interesting about virtual reality is it crosses that threshold. It's no longer you're watching an experience of another person. It is actually your experience that you're having. Now, a lot of those early films that we were making in VR, the documentary work, ultimately you were still witnessing. You're watching, a day in the life of Sidra in a Syrian refugee camp. But the experience is a little bit more. It is one of not just you witnessing, but you actually being present, versus witnessing it through a window. What we're ultimately building in Supernatural is an experience. It is using this incredibly powerful tool of crafted human experience to make a human experience that, makes your life more pleasurable, that there's nothing more transformative than getting healthy over a period of time. And in the best scenarios, it's something that stays with someone and ultimately changes maybe their outlook of themselves or the world or the people around them. And that's what that's what a great movie can do. That's what a great book can do. That's what a great album can do. And it seemed like there was the opportunity to do that sort of thing in the cinematic VR work. But what's been fascinating is watching the feedback from people that have been using Supernatural now for 30, 60 days. The feedback from people is one of not just this sort of momentary spark of I tried this thing at Sundance and I'm writing an article about it, or I watched this music video and here's what I think about it. This is a work that people are engaging with day after day after day. I mean, there's people that are on their 74th day in a row of using Supernatural. The best thing that I've ever done, or the best thing I could ever do from a storytelling standpoint. No one's going to watch, my movie or my music video or my interactive web project every day for 74 days. They're finding a healthier lifestyle through an immersive experience that's enabled by this magical technology of virtual reality. And for us, it's does it need to have a story in between workouts? No. What we're after is, the human experience that's meaningful and transformative. And the way that we build those is we try to imbue them with this, with the, the fuel is joy, awe, and wonder. Like that's what we try to imbue everything with. And that might be that might be an abstract interactive story to an Arcade Fire song where you get in touch with the 8-year-old you, or it could be an interactive experience that you dance around in a future alien world with your friends, or it could be a sport from the future that you get up every morning and do in the footprint of your bedroom, and ultimately get healthier and happier over time.
Totally. And it makes actually a ton of sense thinking about, because to me, as an outsider, Life of Us feels like a really interesting continuation of what you've been doing, but a pretty distinct pivot toward these shared experiences that are also very much about you as a body in space. And seeing that work then carried into Chorus, and now interestingly into Supernatural, because even though you don't have a body, everything about your spatial presence in that world, and in my experience, not being an avatar actually makes my fitness experience better because I'm not thinking about it. It takes me sort of away from it. But it's that language, and it's a very intimate language of what and who are you in a given space. And that's something that VR is really uniquely good at. And I think a lot of times people think about narrative and storytelling as A to B to C, or different act structures or whatever. But narrative is also something that just lives in your brain. And so if I'm standing in a volcano or something before while I'm smashing up futuristic balloons or futuristic baseball bats, the narrative function of my brain is going. I'm establishing some narrative connection to space. But I think a lot of people, if it's not like properly a narrative that's sort of like delivered, there's sort of a disconnect. So I can see, I don't know, I see that that attention that you're putting into it.
Yeah.
We have a little bit of time left, so I want to get to one thing that I know is going to be an important conversation going on, for a long time after this, but COVID has happened. And I think you've been able to learn a lot about Supernatural through just people having a lot more sort of time at home and a demand for this type of thing. What do you think the next phase or phases of virtual fitness are, given that we don't really have any clarity when we're out of the woods with COVID, and given the fact that we very well might be in for more things like COVID, be they natural disasters, human disasters, like where does virtual fitness sort of go from here in your mind?
That's a great question. I mean, we're all living in this sort of strange nowhere zone where we don't know when it's going to end, and we need to stay inside. I've been in my house for months and months, like everyone else. I think, again, we're talking about experiences, right? Like the reality of the world situation now has imposed a experience on all of us that is very similar, in a way that we never really had, inside of our generation. There's probably world wars and things where everything changes for everyone, but in my lifetime, sort of, I go about my life and some other person goes about their life, and we might watch the same television show or something, but we're not sort of like all this, an experience is being sort of put upon all of us. And as I was saying before, like virtual reality is this tool to craft human experiences. So what are the alternative experiences that you can craft and have? And that's really to the imagination of all the creative people that are working in the industry right now. I'm very excited about the prospect of general public being more open to thinking about virtual reality and thinking about virtual reality in other ways besides just gaming. I mean, what, as someone that's been working in VR for a while now, trying to find something that clicks with a mainstream audience that they want to engage with on a regular basis. Our our first thought was maybe this can be sort of an evolutionary step to filmmaking. And while I think that we haven't seen anywhere near like the great works of art in cinematic VR, it is difficult to get a general audience to engage that wants to engage regularly with that sort of medium. And there's many reasons that we go into for another time. But we've been, how do you find something that how do you build something that, if you're not interested in video games, and you're maybe not even interested in VR, this might open the door for you. Because for all of us, whether you're making games or you're making cinematic videos or you're making art pieces, ultimately the only way that this is going to work for all of us is if enough people have headsets that you can build actual businesses around the things that you're making. And that's going to require an audience that's larger than just gaming. So, that's something we really wanted to do. And where does it go? I'm not really sure. I think there's opportunities to connect to other people. I did something a couple of weeks ago. Max, who was one of the founders of Oculus Story Studios, has a company called Adventure Lab now, and they have a piece called Dr. Crumb's something, and it's a 4 quests, and it's an escape room for 4 people, and you buy a ticket, and there's an actor inside of there with you. And each one of you and your friends are an animal. So you're either a dog, a cat, a hamster, and a rabbit. And I did it together with my best friend that lives in San Francisco, who I haven't seen in over a year. My girlfriend that lives in Canada, who I haven't seen in 3.5 months. My co-founder, who lives 5 minutes away from me, but I haven't seen in 3 months. And the 4 of us went through this like magical, collaborative, funny escape room together. And, it was an experience that we had as human beings that, one, we couldn't even have in real life. Like, there's no escape rooms where I get to be a bunny and jump really high, and my friend's a hamster and you can crawl through smaller spaces than he actually is. But it also allowed us to, be closer together than we are physically right now. So, I think there's lots of opportunities as VR for a tool for fitness and wellness and health. And we'll be rolling out some new and interesting ideas around that space, through the rest of the year. But I also think that there's lots of opportunities to just be more human, to connect to each other in this strange, nowhere space that we all find ourselves in.
Amazing. On that note, and it's a perfect note for this, we're going to hop over and do questions. So meet you all over there.